Okay.
Hey, hello, everybody. Dennis Young here. We're up to podcast number 27 already. Please subscribe to the channel, and it's the Primitive Substance YouTube channel. Special guest today, Steve Fallon, who started Maxwell's, and we've got a lot of great stories, I'm sure, about that. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Um,
Hello to everybody out there.
Great. So anyway, how did you get involved with Hoboken and the club and
Well,
maybe
it's
we can
kind of
start from there.
well, ironically, I used to go to the school, St. Peter's Prep in Jersey City, and then every once in a while, like when there was flooding or something crazy going on with the trains in out of Erie, Lackawanna, they would divert the buses through Hoboken, and I used to
Okay.
see, all these kind of semi-abandoned bars. Like I think at one time Hoboken had 98 bars because
Wow.
of all the it was a sailor's port, and it was a steel industry there. So they basically, it was a ball and beer joint for all the sailors and the people that worked in the Maxwell House Coffee and Bethlehem
Oh, how about
Steel,
that?
and Hostess Twinkies was there. So it was a weird kind of thing, since it was really like, and it's now become like the Gold Coast because it was such valuable land, but it was just kind of being like set up between like actually many prior to Hoboken becoming the Hoboken that it is today, that the only way you could really get there was via ferry. So
Wow, I didn't know
it was
that.
yeah, it was also a playground for like the rich and famous, like, and that's why they claim the first baseball game was there because
Hmm.
the Allegiant Fields was where they first had an established baseball game.
How about
And
that?
yeah, because if you go to the back of Hoboken, you'll see these cliffs, which are basically which they ended up building these viaducts to like get you down to there, because and that in the back of Hoboken was just nothing but swamp, so you
Oh,
couldn't.
I see.
So it was almost impossible to get there unless you came from the Hudson River side. So
Oh,
it was always kind of like a little, you had to really know how to navigate yourself in there, even when they built roads eventually, because there's only one road going in and one road going out,
wow.
but nowadays I hear everyone complaining and bitching about that because the traffic is so bad.
Right.
But anyway, so my brother, sister, and brother-in-law, were talking about opening a restaurant and bar and blah blah blah. So I went on I basically a bar crawl every night in Hoboken and looking at all the different bars, and there were a couple for sale. One being
Right.
Maxwell, one being the Madison, and I noticed that there wasn't a whole lot of business in any of them because they really, like as I said, they mostly took all their revenue from the shift changes in these factories and stuff,
Oh,
and
okay.
and the locals, which were kind of more on these, they had their private little clubs, which they basically drink there. The locals and the working establishment didn't really kind of cohabitate. So
Oh, okay.
so it was kind of a strange place, that had a look like, and so we actually liked the Madison, but someone bid us out for that, and then we ended up looking at Maxwell's, and it was really like, I mean, when we first got there, Maxwell's had about four bar stools, one table with three
Wow.
chairs. That was it,
Wow.
and it was kind of a little bit of a dirty place. It took us 6 months to renovate the place, like 7 hours, 8 hours a day,
Wow.
and
How about that?
just cleaning it up. There was so much hair from a dog on the stove that you couldn't recognize it as being a stove.
Now,
It was just
what was the back room? Was that just a
that
storage
that
area?
the back room. Well, it was being used as a storage, but it used to be basically where people got married and had their weddings and stuff. It
Oh,
was a
okay.
little bit. They would rent out that room and have small weddings and whatever, blah blah, or birthdays, so forth. Because the owners before we bought it from the McGoverns, the owners before that were the Chews, which was Eddie Chews, who unfortunately recently passed away. He was a city manager in Hoboken.
Right.
Um, his family had owned that, and they actually had a really tragic accident there where a bus came out of control and busted through the front window and killed his sister.
Oh my
And so,
gosh.
so
Wow.
then the McGovern, Mr. McGovern, he fell down the stairs to the basement stairs in the upstairs apartment hallway and broke his neck. So they always
Oh
said
boy.
there was a lot of darkness going through that
There's a
place.
ghost in that place. Who knows, right?
Well, actually, if you ever took, I mean, there might be photos somewhere around. If you look closely at the doors, that the original swinging doors that went to the kitchen and the swinging glass doors that went to the back room, they were shaped like coffins.
Oh
And
wow.
we
That
had
is
found,
wild.
we had found them in the basement, and we were like, oh, these are cool. And then it didn't until one day I looked at the kitchen door and I said, that's a fucking coffin. It's like, it's really weird.
Wow.
So like said it
Holy
like
smoke.
the peephole that is usually in a kitchen door instead of it being
Right.
round was shaped like a little coffin.
Did anybody
So
notice that when
well,
besides you?
actually, a lot of the guys from Maxwell House Coffee had brought it up to me, and that's when I said, "Oh," and they had said that, because unfortunately, we had a tragedy right before we opened, or just as we opened that.
Oh, you did?
Yes, and my sister's boyfriend, unfortunately, hung himself in the hallway upstairs. And
Wow. Holy
so,
smoke.
so so the guys, they came and all they heard was that someone hung themselves. So they thought it was me. So they're like, oh, you don't know the whole story behind this. And they were telling me all the deaths in the past and all that stuff. And so
Good
when I
Lord.
look up, and in retrospect, I said, maybe we were cleansed by having our death early on, and
Maybe, right.
it took the spiritual, voodoo out of the room. And so
You had to run safe.
unfortunately somebody had to die to do it, but he had
Wow.
some issues and was not in clear mind when that happened, unfortunately.
So the club, so it opened in 1978. Is that
That's correct.
basically?
That's correct.
And
Yes,
then
it opened.
when did you start having the bands? Right away? Is that?
Well, in the beginning, we had like a piano up front, and we had some jazz bands and some local stuff there was no original music per se until, one of the first bands to play there was which was Glenn Morrow and most of the people in the Bongos. And Glenn Morrow, who owns Bar None Records, had the
Oh, that's
Individuals
right.
later on, and he developed his own thing. But it was that played in the front, which ended up split it off, became the Bongos, and Glenn started his own band with the Weigels called the Individuals. And
Oh,
so
I heard of them.
yeah. So, and then we started booking, like we had a pretty progressive jukebox. I'd buy all my singles at, Bleecker Bob's or Vinyl Mania, wherever it was. And so people that came in, like, my good friend Guy Ewald, who became a DJ, he was a very high-end architect in New York, but lived across the street. And
Wow.
this was his music. And so he loved the place. And so they'd all make recommendations about, Glenn would make recommendations or book some of the bands for me. Like, one of the most fun bands to play the front room was the Flesh Tones, because it looked like total
Oh, yeah, I
chaos.
remember them.
Yeah. And then the DBs played the front room. Nervous Rex played the front room.
Wow. How about that?
And
Wow.
I think the Necessaries played the front room. And then we about a year after we first opened, we finally opened the back room, which
Okay.
was, which changed, the makeup, which actually changed it for the better, because I think some of the the success about Maxwell's was that if you wanted to go in the back room, even though it was only $3, you had to pay to get in the back room. So if you wanted to just be a poser and hang out in the front, you stayed up front. So it eliminated, and it kind of brought mostly only the music fans to the back room,
Right.
who
That's great.
were really hungry to hear good new bands and were very appreciative of the bands that came through. And they were the ones that really kind of started it all, because they became faithful and they believed in our booking. Even though they didn't know the band, they would kind of take it on for us to be like that. We're going to give them something good.
I think we played there about 5 times. We loved
You
it
did.
every
You
time.
did many times. Yeah, yeah.
I know
It
we
was
played the 4-piece Liquid and then
Yep.
the 3-piece version of Liquid
Yep.
Liquid played there. So
Yep.
we must have played till like 1985 there, from
Yep.
81 to about 85. It was
That's correct.
fantastic. And how
Yeah.
did you meet Ed? How did you meet Ed from 99? Did you just call him,
Oh,
or
I
did
just
he?
just by going into the record store and we just chat, and he knew about the club, and he would come to the club every once in a while just to see new stuff, especially if it wasn't recorded, because he was interested in putting out bands and stuff,
Right.
and so he was an easy to talk to guy, and he was very knowledgeable, and he would say, oh, you should hear this new band, blah blah. He was a lot easier and more instructor than Bleecker Bob was, you
Well,
know.
I think anybody that wanted to play in New York would always be a good extra gig in New Jersey because you were right
Right,
across the river.
right.
So you had great access to really great band. Did ESG
Well,
play there at all?
who?
ESG. Did they play?
ESG did play there. Yep. Yeah, we
Wow.
had them there. We had New Order's first show in
Oh, no
America.
kidding.
Yep.
Wow.
So we had a lot of people, especially like people like Ruth Polsky always liked our club because, it didn't interfere with contracts of New York because we were in New Jersey. And what they eventually would do is instead of like doing us after a New York show, they would do us before a New York show. And so
I
what
see.
that enabled the critics to come and see them from the New York Times, the Village Voice, whatever, Trouser Press, blah, 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 would come and see this band in this unobstructed, undistracted thing, even though our sound system sucked in the beginning. But they'd
Yeah.
come there and they would give great reviews in the New York Times the next few days and then the show that would be in New York a week later would sell out. So it
Oh,
was almost
wow.
like a promotional thing for both, Dan Soteria, Peppermint Lounge, Jim Farrat used to, want us to book shows there. And then, the Ritz, we didn't have a lot going on with the Ritz, but I think they kind of understood that we were helping their bottom line by having shows before them. No
Yeah.
one objected to our shows because there was
No.
such a small number. And a lot of times, there'd always be fights. You go, you can't book here, you can't play there. But no one cared about us doing it because and we also had a very small advertisement. A lot of it would sell out before it even hit the paper,
That's what I was going to
so
ask you if it sold. The shows must have sold out pretty
yeah,
fast because
it
that's
took
such a
it
great
took a
intimate room.
while. Yeah, and then we sometimes we'd do two shows in a night, blah blah blah. And then we were doing Todd was booking later on, like late 80s, 90s. He was booking two shows of different bands. Like one would be an early show of a different band, a totally different band. And so that was when it got really chaotic because then we were dealing like 600 or 700 people in a club that really only had what do you call it? 200 in the back and 200 in the front. So
Yeah,
there was a lot of traffic jams,
I'm
let's say.
sure. Now you
Yeah.
got a great sound system too. I really loved your
Yeah, I mean,
sound there.
the room sounded good. It took us a while because we were DIY. We didn't, as a club, we didn't act as promoters. We gave 90% of the men, maybe even more, the money at the door. We took $100 for advertisement or something like that.
Right.
So it worked, really great for the bands. It didn't necessarily work for me trying to, get better sound system and better. Our lighting was like I think a bulb. It was pretty funny, but sometimes bands would show up and they go, "Is this the dressing room?"
Oh my gosh.
Oasis came and they said, "We're bigger than the Beatles." This
Oh boy.
we couldn't be playing this small club, but then they had a great show, and afterwards they were
No.
more apologetic. After people played there, even though they were hesitant when they first saw the room, when they realized how much of an excitable crowd that we would draw,
Oh yeah.
and like how they were fans, they weren't just people hanging out, and
Yeah.
so they really, we got some really great shows out of people. We got the Soft Boys first show in America.
Oh wow.
I'm still really good friends with Robin and even Kimberly online, but yeah. So
And who else? What's some of the highlights of? I mean, you mentioned Oasis. You mentioned other.
I
people.
mean, there was,
Everybody.
we would do a week of Fugazi. They would because they only wanted to charge $5. Most clubs wouldn't do that. We said sure, fine, and they
Right.
would they'd almost do like what you would call now a residency for a week.
Oh.
Anyway, and so then we had REM's first, or one of REM's first shows up in the Northeast. They only had just released Radio Free Europe when we first got them in. They were already on the jukebox being played pretty heavily. Then we had, I mean, if you look up Wikipedia, sometimes I forget how many bands we had.
I gotta look it up.
But we had, as many bands as you can possibly, Smashing Pumpkins, Mudhoney, Nirvana's like first
Nirvana,
Nirvana.
wow.
If you look up Nirvana Maxwell's and you see they were open for Tad. And even though like about thousands of people swear that they were at that show, and actually Thurston just referenced that show about how many people we say they were at that show when he actually named all five of us that were there.
Oh, how about
there was
that?
there was us and Tad, and that was it. And yeah, and you can hear, if you listen to the video, you can hear like the very small clapping, like 5 clappings,
Oh,
of
man.
people. And it was a great show, but it took another 1 or 2 times for them to come through before they clicked in, and then they clicked in too big. But they always, a lot of bands, even if they were over the size of our room, would come back and do, like Beck would always come back and do shows, with that,
Oh, love him, yeah.
yeah. So there was a lot of faithfulness, and because they looked at it as a good time. We didn't really allow cameras in there except for for a few people that we knew were not exploiting them and use them as, because we had a lot of famous people that would come hang out there, like Art
Oh,
Garfunkel,
really?
and things, just like people would just show up one night and they'd be like sitting at the table, and you're like, okay. And so we did that so that they didn't feel like that they were being paparazzi'd. And so if we felt that the camera guy was a paparazzi kind of guy, we said, you can't. And unfortunately, history wise, we have very few photos.
How about that? Huh.
Yeah.
Now forget it. Now forget it. You'd have to give them their cell phone at the door.
Exactly right.
Box,
Exactly right. Yeah. Yeah.
How
I don't
about
know. I don't know if that kind of club can repeat itself. Quite honest with you. Again,
No, it was amazing. And then you had the Bongos were really, did they practice there also?
They practiced in the back room. Yeah. Frank was a chef for us, for the drummer. And then, so we, basically the music community in Hoboken came together pretty quickly, and like we try to help each other out. There was guys at Water Music Studios that, we borrowed music equipment from them, and they would actually, they sometimes rehearsed in the room, or I think they did it. I think they did they got signed to BMG, and they did a showcase there for BMG or something. So we always try to help the other guy out. And I think that's what people always remembered and likened us for. And that, when you ever read reviews, fans would say that they couldn't wait to get to Maxwell just because we would feed them well.
How about that? That's true. Yeah, and the front bar, it was perfectly set up too, because you had people that weren't really interested in music up front at the bar, but the real devoted fans or wanted to hear some great music that was going to be in New York, where maybe it was too big of a club or they got lost. They could really get an intimate feeling at your place. That's another thing. We love playing there because of that too.
Well, cool. Well, thank you. The New York Magazine, somewhere in the 80s, I think, voted us the best club in New York, even though we were in New Jersey.
Now, did you have the Village Voice come? Any of their writers?
Crisco came all the time. Came all the time. He would just hang out in the corner, and he would go. He was an odd fellow.
He was.
I think that he started to come around. I think after when some of the harder stuff like Husker Du and stuff like started showing up, that he started to not be so, I guess we call generic. But he always picked bands at our club, even if he didn't. He would even admit that he didn't know who exactly what they are, but there was a lot of buzz about him. So like, you should go see this band, blah blah blah. So we always were lucky that we always got picks in the New Yorker. We always got picks in the pretty much every week we'd get picked as the club to go see a show, and that was all well and good for a couple of years. And then it became like, no, I can't get you in. If there's 200 people here, you can't be the 220th person in the door.
That's funny.
Yeah. And there was a lot of people that worked there would kind of go like, how come it doesn't feel so crowded? And I would say girth. And they go, what do you mean? I said, well, when it's a young audience, they're a lot skinnier and it doesn't look as crowded in the room. I said, but when it's a 30, 40-year-old crowd, they're bigger guys and they take up a lot more room. and they always thought I was crazy when saying that, but it's really true. It's like bigger guys take up more space.
Did you get any punk bands? I know City Gardens had a lot of punk bands. Did they come your way too? Like with
We did some punk, not a lot. I'm trying to remember some of the punk stuff. I think um, we did. I think what was it? Well, there was Fugazi, which really wasn't punk, but
right.
we did a lot of the Discord bands, in which work could kind of fall into punk or whatever it was. But I don't think that we were. I think we had who was it? Black Flag. We had a lot of the SST bands.
Oh
So,
yeah, I remember them.
but and they weren't like the punk, which a lot of the punk stuff I felt was just spoiled little brats sometimes,
Yeah,
revolting against their very rich parents.
yeah.
And so,
There you go.
and I kind of, and so and I think we had the Murphy's Law, play like that. And it usually was, and it wasn't very conducive. Like those are the kind of crowds that didn't marry well with the front room and the back room, because they thought they were there to disrupt society or the establishment, and they looked upon us sometimes as the establishment.
Yeah,
And you're kind of like going, we're kind of giving you room to play, and you're going to get paid. So I don't know, pick your poison, buddy boy. So there was some people, what was the Rasta band with RJ or HAR from DC? I can do
yeah.
Bad Brains, like Bad Brains. So we kind of try to bring in more adulty punk, let's say,
Right.
like the just yelling and ripping your shirt off and trying to be Iggy Pop was not my thing.
Did you have Gang of Four play at?
I did not have Gang of Four because they were way too big before they got here.
Yeah,
Although
I
now
remember.
I'm good friends with Hugo Burnham, and I've talked to him a number of times. I met up with him just last year and at the Nugget show, and it turns out that his wife is somebody I knew from years ago. So it's like it's a small circle of world sometimes
It
when you
is.
think of that. Yeah.
Well, that's
But
why I wanted. Go ahead.
we're good. But
Well,
like
that's
we
why I
had people.
wanted to do this. Go ahead. Sorry.
We had like Luscious Jackson, which was kind of affiliated with Mike Diamond and all those people. So the people usually, if they saw something that they really liked or they wanted to promote a little bit, they would kind of throw it my way, which was good.
Oh
And
yeah,
then
that's great. Yeah.
and we had some tremendous New Year's Eve shows, that were pretty wild. We didn't charge an arm like maybe $20, and we gave you a buffet, and would be people like Husker Du or Human Switchboard, the Bongos,
Oh wow.
So it would just be a party kind of
Yeah.
atmosphere. So we try to, as I said, try to give back to the community because they're the ones that were keeping us in business.
Oh yeah. You had Sonic Youth play also.
Oh yeah, Thurston played there, and with Sonic Youth and all those people played quite a bit. Yeah, and although I couldn't figure out whether they liked playing there or not. I mean, I think Thurston did. I think that whole. Well, actually, Steve Shelley ended up buying part of Maxwell's years later on, but with Todd, and so
Well,
they, sometimes Thurston was always very, very, amicable, but they sometimes wondered, are they liking this, or is that their nerves, or do they just hate playing here? So you sometimes, my insecurities would kind of get to me sometimes going, do they really like playing here? It's like, but they played there quite often, and they always brought in like a new band that they loved and brought them there.
well,
And I
that's
think,
nice.
yeah, I think so. Thurston was there the night of the first Nirvana thing. And in his book,
Wow.
he did, so he talks about, how everyone, he glorified our club and said, like, how we would take on the underdog, no one knows band kind of thing, just by like, listen to it. We also try to book similar bands or bands that we know that we didn't just kind of throw spaghetti at the wall. And so we try to have, we would really tentatively take it. Like if a band didn't have a release, we would try to listen to their cassette or whatever it was, and that and try and match bands that had not so much similarities, but we could see having the same kind of audience base.
Right,
And so
right.
that would help promote the show, because then it would bring in a bigger crowd, and then people who were there for the headliner may find that they like the opener better.
Right,
So
right.
so we tried desperately not to just do like the 5 band thing a night with and just being having no synchronicity. So
Now, did you have groups every night, or was it just?
we had bands mostly every night. There was a period of time when the Path Train went on strike for a while, and we had to kind of close down for a couple of months until the Path Train got its shit back together.
Right.
And because people weren't going to drive or walk or get to there any other way. The Path Train was our connection to downtown New York. So whenever that would go on strike or something like that, we'd have to have a little recess for a while. But mostly, I would say I was there at least from 78 to 94. That I don't think that there was a lot of interruption in music, and we would in the summer sometimes we go to 4 days and 5 days because it just the weekends were the weak time of the year because everyone was at the beach or Long Island or wherever or South Jersey. So we kind of played it by ear unless it was a band that we knew that would just bring in somebody. So we had an open forum with that, and most of the time I think, but then towards probably the late 80s, it was like pretty much every night. As I said, maybe sometimes twice a night.
Wow. Now, what was the end of Maxwell's? Did you just didn't have another audience going, or you just had enough of the?
Well, I left in 95 because I was not really crazy about, well, first of all, that we were pretty much independent and blah, blah, blah. And then when it became more famous, people would try to, like booking agents would try to have us take bands that we hated. I think that one of my finals, the straw that broke my back was when we were there. I was there one night and Korn was playing, and the bass player, like first of all, they had 2 tour buses outside over the top, and the bass player gets off the stage, and I guess the driver didn't open the door quick enough, something really bad, and he punches him in the face. And I just looked at Todd. I said, "You know why I opened this club, Todd?" I said, "Was not to deal with people like this."
No, that's ridiculous.
And so we were, and it wasn't Todd's fault. We basically the booking agent said, "Well, if you don't take this band, we're not going to give you that band." So they started shoving stuff down our throat, and they try to align everything with grunge. It was like they're not a grunge band, they're not a punk band, it's like they're a metal weird band, and so they try to get us to bring in stuff in it. So the pressure was kind of getting to me, and I really wasn't liking. I was, if you follow my stuff earlier on, I was a little bit more, like DNA, like your band, like I liked a little bit more of the edgier stuff, but not hardcore or not metal. And so when it started getting to that, I felt that it was changing, like even into the grunge scene. I wasn't thrilled with every band I saw. There were some that I liked, but those were far in between. But actually, ironically, in the record store we have now, the '90s record stuff sells for crazy money, and I'm just like kind of going, I don't get it. Yeah. But that's me, because my I guess my taste was a little bit more guitar orientated, jangly, bands with lyrics and stuff like that. They could be edgy, but it couldn't be all noise. And so that's or sonic, should I say? And not talking about sonic youth. I'm talking about just make the room being so fucking loud that your ears bleed, and it just this is not comfortable to me.
No, there's a lot of that out there still.
And I just thought I had a good run, and I was just about and there were some other things changing in band stuff. During the '80s, everyone was there was people doing cocaine and drinking, which was fine and dandy. It never got out of hand. But once the heaviness of the heroin started coming into folds, like in the late '80s, '90s, I was like, now this I do not like.
Yeah.
And so it was like, I think it was a survival thing. And so like before I die, and I think that I kind of felt that I ran my the gas out of my engine.
you had a great run, and
Yeah,
coke was a big deal back then. I think not as much as you said heroin.
yeah,
Coke
right.
was really prevalent
Yeah,
then.
that was all the thing, like you went to Jerry, like you could always find the Coke dealer, it's like,
Right,
so, so that, and then, you try, with anything extreme, that the extremities of all that stuff could get to you. And, if you want to function and get up the next day and be open your club and run it correctly and be aware of what's going on, you can't be doing that 24/7.
right,
So,
right.
so, and plus also I just thought I needed a change in life, and that's when I mean, it was so drastic. I moved to Rehoboth Beach, Delaware.
Oh,
It's like,
wow, okay. Yeah,
so that's
that is.
where I live now. Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
it has nothing. There is no similarities whatsoever.
No. Now, have
You
you
know.
ever thought of writing a book about this whole your experience with?
I Peter Buck and I actually started out on a book tour, a book thing, and we had hired a book agent, and I don't know what went wrong, but the book was supposed to be called "Asleep on the Stage" and blah blah blah, and so they sent it out to all these publishers who were probably pretty young and may not even remember Maxwell's at that time, and uh, and with the thing saying it's kind of a regional thing, you know. And they, without my knowledge, they changed the name of the book to Tunnel Vision,
Oh,
like the tunnel crowd, and I'm like,
right, right,
oh, totally missed the mark. And I was just like, how dare you change the name of the fucking book? So
right.
it kind of dismayed me. Other people have offered for me to do something. I also feel that, you know just like, that I think that a lot of it was really belonged to the people who actually were actually in it and part of it, and the musicians like yourself, and
Right.
the people that hung out there and made the scene itself. And I think that maybe I'm too corny about this, but I think that it belongs to them. It doesn't belong to everybody else.
No, that's
So
a good point.
yeah,
That's
so
a
I
good
just,
point.
and I think that, historically, maybe one day, when I'm really retired, I'm 70 now, and I just sold my record store, and I still have my other store. So who knows?
Yeah,
I might get back on that keyboard and just start writing. And it's
yeah,
interesting how
yeah.
when you start doing that, it starts flowing pretty well.
Right,
And,
right. Well, I
so
thought of a book myself. I haven't really gone forward with it yet, but you never know. I mean,
you never know, right? Yeah.
like I never
Yeah, I
thought
think.
I'd do a podcast show. I never
Yeah,
thought I'd do
right,
this.
right. Yeah, life changes in strange ways. That's for sure.
It
The
does.
but I actually have read some other people's books, and I sometimes read some of their takings, or their um, take on that period of time, and I'm like going, what are you talking about?
Yeah,
It's like, because I'm just like going like, I don't remember that, and so sometimes it's too they sensationalize it somewhat, or make it a little bit more, you know uh, juicier than it really needs to be, and doesn't really tell the true story, in my opinion. But that's me. I'm
right.
I'm a I'm always a critic, so I'm like,
Well,
I'm reading every word and going, what are you talking about?
now
But
the record stores you owned, were they down in the Delaware area?
yeah, it's right. Actually, I'm in the bathroom of the record store right now.
How about
It,
that?
it, it's called Extended Play, and you can look online, and we
Okay,
sell a lot of used, really good stuff. The Jackson Beckner is the owner now. He worked for me
okay,
for many years and worked his way into owning parts of it. And then this year, I was deciding on whether to sell the other store or this store, and I just said, you know what, these are for they're younger, they're 28 years old, they're more into finding new bands. I as I said, I sometimes I put a record and go like, yes,
yeah,
but and
yeah,
don't want to, because it just might not be like the grunge thing. It just wasn't my thing.
yeah,
And so I think that you have to really run a successful record store, you have to have a very wide variety of likings, which is what I
right,
had back
right,
then. But now it's kind of like, as you get older, you get a little bit less irritable, or more irritable, at some
right.
of the shit that you hear, and you just go, oh god.
I know.
But
Well, I go through Bandcamp once in a while and try to find good bands, and it's maybe one out of so many that I like. I
right,
just really have to search these days because there's so much out there.
Got it.
It's good, bad, and ugly. It's what it is.
It
You know.
is, yeah, yeah. I know there, but I mean, I did like the fact that I think it was the last 2 or 3 years there was a lot of really good women bands that came out with really strong stuff, and so that was that was somewhat interesting to me and made me pay a little bit more attention. But you know, again, it's that I'm 70 years old. I could get to a show in Philadelphia here now. It takes me 2 hour ride or DC.
Right.
And so, unless I know the bands personally, I usually don't make that trip.
Yeah.
So, so I'm in a quiet little beach town, so it's okay. You know what I mean?
Now the vinyl records these days are so expensive. I mean, who's buying
Right.
these records? Just the rich yuppies, or you know?
Um, well, actually, in the beginning, like probably 10 or 12 years ago, maybe longer, it was the 13 to 20-year-olds that were just, buying what their friends were buying, and it was the typical classic rock stuff, blah blah blah. Through that time, we noticed there was a switch that people started, like, now the parents of these people, and even sometimes the grandparents of some of these kids, would start dusting off their turntables, and then going like, I had all these records and I gave them away, and I should have never given away. So when we have record store day, we have what they call a virtual line. And when we used to not do the virtual line before COVID, you just had to wait outside and wait online. It was
Right.
mostly young people, because older people didn't really want to stand in a line for 3 or 4 hours. So
Right.
we do what we call a virtual line. So when we know the date, we open up the portal so they can make reservations, and we make reservations 12 every half hour until 11 o'clock, from 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock. And that brings in about 60 people. And then the
Hmm.
first few times we did that, we noticed that the age group increased to much older.
How
Now
about that?
when they come in, they drop $500 or $600, where a kid
Oh, okay.
online maybe only buy one record. So
Right.
it kind of stirred the market back to, like, people who have a little bit more money, which is
Right.
interesting.
Now
And
you
so
now you carry cassettes
we
and
carry some kits. Jackson does carry some cassettes. We do some CDs. We don't do new CDs or new cassettes unless it's maybe a record store day release or a special release. But the store, we try to centralize it on vinyl, and
okay.
some equipment. And that's about it.
Well, I just talked to somebody, Stephen Buckley. He's an independent artist in the UK. I asked him about, what do you put out? You put out physical product these days, and he said he puts out cassettes mainly because they have a physical product with the music.
Right. Right.
So they have something physically to hold on to. I mean, they're probably not going to listen to it unless they have a cassette player. But
Well,
I mean,
actually, well, it depends on how old he is. If he's like a the younger kids like the kind of backward technology of the cassette,
yeah,
and so they like to have it because, like you're saying, physical, and this little machine that goes, just has a little spindle that plays
yeah,
it. So that, yes, there, it's that when some artists put out cassettes, like, like, I don't think the cassette, like Adele would do very good on a cassette.
yeah, right.
But but we do take independent bands cassettes and sell them, like local stuff here. And that,
Okay,
so that's, and so that's usually a network that's inside itself, kind of like podcasts, that,
right,
certain people follow them, and they wait for stuff, and that's the only way of getting it, and that's what they do. And although makes, like maybe 50 CDs or something like that, very generically handmade artwork, blah blah blah. So there's many different styles. You could, if we were in an urban area, we could probably expand on that, but we rely on the beach tour, since we're a tourist town. We're a
right.
resort tourist town, so we really
Okay,
rely on. So the to kind of figure out the demographics of who's coming through our door is sometimes harder than if you were in a city, knowing that you're getting all this cultural, variances walking in
right,
your door.
right.
And so, like, we try to, we can do some hip hop, but not a lot of the hip hop, kind of stuff. Like, uh, Tyler the Creator would sell immediately, but you bring in somebody new, and it's like, nah. So the thing here is that then also here, there isn't really much radio. The radio here is totally classic rock and or talk stations, very politically
Mm,
to the right. And so that they don't really have a lot of places to get their music from except from their friends. So whatever their friends are liking, that's what they're hearing.
okay.
So it's not a it's that I wish there was a way of trying to change that vehicle, but
Right.
in small towns or small areas like this, there just isn't anyone willing to put their foot forward and take the risk on an alternative radio station.
Right.
So
Well, I don't know what the future is now with this AI, with all this music and art and everything else. People are really going to have to figure this out. What's real, what's not, and
right,
mostly live shows, I guess, to really still get a feel of what a band is like these days.
right.
I don't know what you're seeing there as far as
Well, actually, it's funny you said that because I just friends of mine, which I get, they're people I know from down here, and they're Deadhead. So they just went to the Sphere to see that Dead and Company thing,
right,
and the visuals on that thing were just like this, super gigantic, movies of like, almost like Arc from kind of Grateful Dead movies, and you couldn't see the band,
oh,
so it was really distorting what you were doing. It's like, yeah, okay, so you want to just see a movie, you want to see, like with like a silent movie with
right,
an orchestra playing in the background. It kind of just went like, ooh, I don't know if I could like that, and I don't know if
yeah,
I could sit through a whole 2 hours of that. So I'm not a fan of that kind of thing because just like vinyl and like you're saying, physical property. Like I wasn't a big fan of streaming, and so because again, I want to know about the band, I want to know about the
right.
history of
I
them,
agree.
who the players are, where it was recorded, who was the engineer, who was the producer, blah blah blah. So you can't get all that information when you're
No,
streaming. Most people are just too fucking lazy to actually research that.
and then a
So
musician like myself takes the time to put the songs in order, to
right,
really work on an album that it's constructive. Nowadays, some of these kids just go through a okay, song, 30
right,
seconds. It's,
yeah, I know,
right on
right,
their phone. So it's a
yeah,
weird, total change of world that we've seen happen
yeah.
here because of the smartphone.
Right. But I
The
also think
technology.
that but with the vinyl surgeons, I also think there is somewhat, but I don't think it will ever overtake the technology world. But there is a somewhat, of a backlash to try and get into more, uh, organic stuff like, vinyl
Right,
and hearing, going to hear bands and stuff like that. Like I think that, Philadelphia has really become a really big town now for bands to play. Years ago, we would always skip over when we would take
right,
the Phillies
right.
on tour. We'd skip over
Yeah,
Philadelphia because they were
in
only
Philly,
like,
yeah. Right,
yeah, because they would only like Spandau Ballet or Adam
right,
Ant.
right.
But
That's true.
now it's become like this more of this underground kind of scene there, which is
Hmm.
kind of cool. And they have a bunch of clubs and there's always people going through there, and there's like the WXPN is a good radio station that promotes a lot of the older stuff and the newer stuff.
Right,
So it's a good mix, of kind of, which is which is a talent you got to have to make
right.
it work,
Oh, yeah.
to make it work.
Well, I think
So
Brooklyn is really happening these days too.
yeah,
There's
and
a little
Brooklyn's
bit.
like that, but but a lot, but talking about that, can a young musician live in Brooklyn these days with the affordability
That's
of the
true.
cost of
You're right.
Philadelphia is really cheap to live in. I almost bought a townhouse there because you get like when they thought Amazon was going there about 8 years ago, they were building they were taking all these older townhouses and renovating them, and you could buy them for $250,000. There were 3 stories,
Wow. Huh.
and like really really cool place, and you still can get like a pretty inexpensive townhouse there for like $300,000 to $400,000. But the problem with Philly, which if you're from New York, it probably wouldn't affect you, but everyone goes, "Oh, the crime, the crime, the crime." We go, there's a crime in every urban area.
That's
You
true.
know,
You're
you
right.
just don't pick to be like to sit on the end of a gun.
Yep.
So So it's there's hope, I think.
Yeah,
You know,
there
and
is. There
unless
is.
it's all like you said, the AI makes everything fizzle out, and you just go, eh.
I
But
know. Well, they're trying to push that down our throats, and I mean,
yeah,
people hopefully wake up and still see that they could go to shows, they could buy records,
right,
and there's still physical product out there for people to enjoy. That's all you
right.
can do.
Yep.
So I can't think of anything else. It was great having you on. Now,
Oh,
what?
great. Well, thank you very
Well,
much, and I wish you well. And if you're ever
you too. And
down in Delmarva Coast,
I'm going
come
to come
visit me.
down. I'll
All
look you
right,
up.
cool.
Send me the some of your links to the store and
Okay.
anything else, and I'll post it in the description on the
Uh,
podcast.
okay, good. And actually, send me your email via because I
Sure,
think
I
all I have
will.
is your Facebook thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
so send me your
I'll
email.
send your email address.
All right, great.
All right, thanks
Thanks
for
a lot.
coming on. Nice
Well, you
meeting
good
you
now.
again. Take
Bye.
care. Bye bye.
Bye. All right.